For the Macabre, which for like a quick spoiler, follow a quick primer follows Lewis Dixon, who's a prophetic painter who teams up with the British Museum to help find his ancestors' 10 cursed paintings, which they believe have magical abilities that can affect the fate of the world, while at the same time a nun is chasing him and the paintings parallel for her own personal reasons. For this story, actually, Cassandra, who is the nun that I just mentioned, was the first character that came to mind. She came fully formed. She's very heavily inspired by a song. Florence and the Machines has a song called Cassandra. The name is like one to one. And so she came to me like fully formed from this song. And I kind of built the novel in many ways around her. The book went through a lot of iterations of how she would be part of the novel, be it just like epitaphs, be it letters, and her involvement changed. The very first version, Lewis was not a painter. He inherited a home that had a cursed painting inside of it and more of this sort of like Law and Order style procedural investigation. And that just wasn't working for me. I try to have all of my books say something, and it wasn't saying anything about the world at large. And so I was thinking about art and the role of artist and the expectation of artists. And by making Lewis a struggling artist juxtaposed with this institution of the British Museum, which positively or negatively has a lot of history in its role in art, worked a lot better. So I completely broke the book apart, redid it, and kind of just drafted it in a very much fugue state. Like Lewis goes in when he's painting and sent it to my agent, and I was like, I don't know if this is anything. And he said it was something. It's funny enough, it's my most successful like sale of a book. It was my fastest sale. It sold in 2 weeks for six figures. And it was the book that took me probably a year to actually be confident to put on submission. Now, I would say for almost every single one of my books, it starts with something that's fully formed, be it a plot element, a scene, kind of like the meta narrative that I want to comment on. And for this one, just listening to that song by Florence just made me think of a woman and the struggles of women throughout time and kind of the juxtaposition of men and the power that men take from women without recognition. And when I was thinking about that, kind of this image of a nun just came to mind and her struggles with faith and also how faith can be perverted and the questions of what it means to try and be holy, kind of as a carrot at the end of a stick that you can never reach. And those sentences kind of burst into my head. And when they did, they kind of like molded together. And I was like, what type of person was this? And Cassandra came to mind. And so, like, oftentimes what I always think about is this a character that comes to mind that is good to be a main character, or is it more interesting as a side character? And I kind of wondered if I could write the whole book from Cassandra's point of view, but it kind of lost something with having her already have so much baggage that I thought the reader would need to kind of get exposed to that slowly throughout the book. So she was delegated to a side character, which then was kind of the reverse. I was like, well, we have a side character. How do I build up a main character that is just as compelling as Cassandra, in many ways more compelling? Because if not, we've all read books or seen TV shows where the side character kind of takes the spotlight, and that's never what I want to happen. We have Lewis, our painter. Noah Rao is a member of the British Museum's Cursed Antiquities Department, which is a sub-secret division which is in charge of working for the Crown to find cursed artifacts throughout the world. He's like a senior junior agent. And then Evangeline runs this whole department as the head charge. She also doubles as the director of the British Museum. When I knew that this was going to be paintings, I knew it was going to be a struggle. Like I was like, the paintings have to be rich and they have to each feel like there isn't a drastic dichotomy in powers or abilities. So one is incredibly scary and one isn't as scary, but I can't repeat them over and over again what makes them scary. So trying to balance how powerful these paintings are and how haunting they could be was big for me. The other thing, without giving too much away, is that each painting, and I'll probably like release this later on, is based off of a specific painting like throughout history. So even if chronologically in time that painting's inspiration shouldn't have existed yet, there's some time wonkiness in the story. So I wanted to kind of give homage to different painters throughout history. The other thing is that art is not my forte. It is not. I'm writing a book about painting, and I struggle at an art gallery. I think I got a C plus in my art history class. So it was like an interesting challenge for me, but I've always loved the idea of cursed artifacts. There was a show called Warehouse 13 on Sci-Fi that was about artifacts that I absolutely love. There's a lot of influences from Fringe, the TV show. And so this idea that artifacts can hold history that kind of perverses them is really interesting to me. The cover has the first painting that you meet, which is called The Drowning, which is all about a woman who was drowned in the very beginning of the book, and of this whole chronological of the creation of these paintings. And as such, it is a painting that produces gallons and gallons of water. And in a confined space, so much water would drown anyone inside of it. And it's a representation of what happened to this woman. And kind of each painting follows a similar. The second painting that you meet is called The Kindness, which is all about the emotional representation of what it means to be kind. I've always been interested in the idea of being nice versus kind and how death itself can be a kindness and this perverted act of what that means. I thought about each painting because luckily when I was thinking about structure, because to me, structure of a book is just as important as the text. I wanted each section to have its own painting, and I wanted kind of each section. In one of the earlier drafts, this book was going to be a collection of short stories where each painting was we followed kind of the paintings throughout history, which made a whole novel. And so each section I wanted to feel like its own story, which meant that the theme of the chapter had to in some way relate to whatever the painting was about. They couldn't feel drastically diametrically opposed. So when plotting out the story, I kind of wrote the story first and in my outline and figured out what important beats I wanted to happen or our character or our reader to learn in each individual section, and then created a painting that somehow amplified that moment or that experience based on the narrative storytelling. And then I tried to just beef up in each thing after I made the painting. What would make this scarier? What would make it creepier? Each painting is linked to Lewis's ancestor and a moment in time that he created said painting, what influenced it. So then I had to think, we have this painting that is like a snapshot in time. And as we know, a lot of paintings are inspired by people's lives. How do I make it so you can understand as the reader what led up to the creation of this painting? So each section was like a three-part exercise. I originally did not have him as a major part. I thought that distance was important to talk about how we are in charge of making our own destinies despite what our ancestors might have done or not done in our past. But then I was like, let's get crazy and let's see how crazy we can get in this book. And as you said, it's a wild ride because there's a lot of different elements. This has heists elements, there's geopolitical elements, there's cultural elements, there's time travel elements. And so I kind of just threw everything on the page. And I remember saying to my editor when I sent in the draft, because I sold it on a proposal, which means he only had the first 50 pages of it. He basically had up until chapter 4. And I was like, this book's gonna get crazy. And he was like, let's see how crazy it gets. And then I realized that there is power in being able to actually learn about his ancestor in a more intimate setting.